Hey Tribe, it's Cass. I wanted to do this video today to discuss what everybody's been talking about, the verdict in the Bill Cosby case. He was sentenced to, we know he was found guilty. He was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison for sexual assault. And as somebody who has been through that and came out of it, first of all, I want to say I don't describe myself as a victim. It's just not a word I use for myself. It's not to discredit anybody else who's been through it, who has dealt with it. That's what it is. You are a victim of sexual assault. I get that. It's just not a word I use to describe myself. So I'm just going to say, as somebody who has been through it and who has come out of it, I first want to say he deserved to go to jail. That's just what it is. He did. He deserved to pay for his crimes because that's something that follows you for the rest of your life. It affects you. It affects your mental. It affects your spiritual. It affects your physical, definitely. But those scars run deep and they follow you and they affect you for the rest of your life. With that being said, I don't want to discredit anybody or make anybody feel like, their voice doesn't matter, what they've been through doesn't matter, because that is not the case. If you are a victim of sexual assault, you need to tell somebody so that way you can get help and that person can be prosecuted to the highest extent of the law. That's just what needs to happen because that is not okay under any circumstances. What I will say is that I have mixed feelings about this case, as do a lot of people, but here's why I have mixed feelings. Keep in mind, these are just my opinions. On the bigger scale of things that probably don't mean much to anybody except for me. I'm just sharing with you how I feel because conversation is a catalyst for change. You'll hear me say that a lot because a lot of these conversations that I'm going to have today and in the coming weeks with different people, they're very much needed. They need to be had in our community to make change, which is why I started this. So I have mixed feelings because as somebody who's come out of that, I know that a lot of people don't report crimes like this because they fear that they won't be believed. They fear that nothing will happen to the offender, and they just don't think that anybody cares. And that's not true. And as we've seen with this, things, even if it takes a while, things will happen. That person will be punished. Karma comes back to anybody at some point eventually anyway. It will catch up to them at some point in their lives. But you also have another situation, like the situation with the other gentleman who sexually assaulted the lady recently, and he, not kidnapped her, but lured her into his car under the disguise of giving her a ride, and then he choked her and made her unconscious, and he masturbated on her and just pretty much left her there after he abused her. He was told that he gets a one-time pass. Now, how is that fair? Because when you look at victimology, then that's going to tell these women, other women whose accusers have not paid for their crimes, that your pain is not as valid or as important as somebody else's pain and what they've been through. It's still the same scars. It's still going to hurt, and it's still something she has to live with for the rest of her life if this happened to her. She didn't ask for it. He took it upon himself to force his will and his agenda on her. She didn't ask for that, but they gave him a one-time pass. Going 35 in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, get a one-time pass for that. Something like that I can understand. Running the red light, rolling through a stop sign, that's something you would get a one-time pass for. Sexually assaulting somebody is not something that you would get a one-time pass for. That's not fair, and that should not happen. So I feel like if we're going to make Bill Cosby the example and say this is what happens when you do this, no matter how long it's been, we need to make that across the board for everybody. Whether that's Weinstein, whether that's Kavanaugh, whether that's Trump, they all need to be held accountable for their actions. You can't make it to where it only affects a certain group of people or a certain person when you want to make them the statement person to say this is what we'll do to you if you do this. Then you let 5 or 6 other people slide. That's just not okay. And it makes no sense to me. And this is why I take issue with this case. I also take issue with the fact that I feel like a lot of people jumped on this Me Too bandwagon. As someone, again, who has survived this, I support the Me Too movement. I feel like it's valid. And I feel like that if more women felt they had somebody to turn to, they would stick together and they would speak out. And we need to be more aware of what's happening in our society when it comes to sexual assault. We need to have this conversation so that way the abuse can stop. But it's for people who have been sexually assaulted against their will, not for people who are consensually going into these encounters. And then when it doesn't work out the way they thought it was going to work out, or it doesn't work to their agenda the way they planned, they now want to come back and say, oh, he raped me. There's a big difference there. It's not the same thing at all. I don't believe all of his accusers were sexually assaulted. I believe some of them consented and it didn't go the way they thought it was going to go. So they jumped on the bandwagon. Again, this is just my opinion and the way I feel about it, which is why I said I have mixed feelings. I also feel like that in our society, we have this habit of saying, oh, that's history. That was so long ago, it doesn't matter. So you mean to tell me that these people, some of which are lying and were not assaulted, can come back 30 years later and say, oh, he did this and he should pay for it. But then you have Emmett Till's accuser who admitted that she lied on him and he lost his life. She doesn't have to go to jail. How is that fair? There needs to be punishment for people who falsely accuse people because actions have consequences. So in this case, Bill Cosby went to jail. Yes, for some of the things he was guilty of, some of the things he was not. He still has to serve prison time because of this. Emmett Till lost his life. And again, everybody keeps saying that was history, it was so long ago. Let me put some context to that history. He was murdered in 1955. My mother, who was the youngest of 10 siblings, or 9 other siblings, she was the 10th one, was born in 1965, which is 10 years later. Her oldest sibling was born in 1947. So my aunts and uncles all have recollection, and they were old enough when this happened. They're still alive and well. They're not history. So it wasn't that long ago that black men were still being falsely accused and murdered with no trial, no jury, no fair due process. And it's still happening today. I feel like we have a push-pull relationship with the justice system, where every time we feel like we're moving a little bit forward, we're still halted by something and we're still getting pushed back. We're not making any progress. It sounds good on paper. It looks good in the newspapers, and we can all go and kumbaya at a football game. That's another topic for another day. But we still haven't made any real progress. And it's not fair. We can't keep allowing the idea that is good for some, but not for everybody else, to be the prevailing ideology of our country. This is why I say that conversation is the catalyst for change, because I don't want my daughter to still be sitting here 10, 15, 20 years from now, still saying the same thing, that nothing has changed for their generation. Again, if he did the crime, I absolutely agree he should do the time. But there needs to be some type of backlash of people who are falsely accusing people, and the consequences for these actions need to be fair across the board. Because otherwise, what's the point? That means we're still back in a time where privilege is awarded to some, and everybody else are being treated like non-citizens or second-class citizens, and that's just not right. So again, this is just my opinion. I want you guys to wait and keep this conversation going, because once again, conversation is the catalyst for change. It's only going to change if we talk about it, and then we hold those that we elect into positions of power responsible enough to implement the changes that we demand. So keep the conversation going. I want you guys to share this. I want you guys to let me know what you think, and I'll be responding back to the comments. Hey guys, it's Cass. If you like my video, remember to leave your comments below. I will respond to comments, but please subscribe, share this video, and keep the conversation going with your friends. And also click the little bell so you get notifications when I post more content.